So, hello everybody. So now you should hear me well. All right, so I'm starting from the previous slide again. Hello and welcome everybody to our webinar here today at Fronius International. We have the topic expanding existing PV systems with a Fronius GEN24 inverter today. Now, before I explain a little bit more in detail what's up with this title, I want to introduce the team for today. And yeah, my name is Christoph Schirlinger. I'm in team trainings and education here at Fronius International in the solar energy department. But I'm not alone. I'm together here with my colleague, Michael Raunig. He's in the same team trainings and education, and he's responsible for the chat today. So there is my first plea. So if you have any questions during the webinar, if anything is unclear, don't hesitate, use the chat function on the right side of your screen, send your question through, and Michael is then trying to answer as good and as quick as possible. And also at the end of the webinar, we will take a few minutes time to answer maybe a few questions live as well. Yeah, so I will guide you now through the next 35 to 40 minutes, and I will start with showing you the agenda, so a quick overview of the topics today, and as promised, a better explanation what's up with this title of the webinar. And yeah, the actual focus of this webinar is on mixed systems. So the far left bubble we can see here, mixed systems is what I refer to as we have an existing PV system with a Fronius snap inverter, for example, or with even a third-party inverter from another brand. And then the customer decides to integrate a GEN24 Plus inverter as well into the system because he's trying to integrate a DC coupled battery, for example. So he adds a GEN24 inverter, and now we have a mixed system of different brands, of different inverter generations. And I want to show you in this webinar how we can integrate different manufacturers of inverter and different inverter generations into one Fronius Solar.web system. So this is the main focus of this webinar about mixed systems. Another big topic today is also the power reduction. This is of course also possible for mixed systems. So it's also possible if we talk, for example, about a Fronius snap inverter and a GEN24 inverter in one system. We also can do here a dynamic power reduction, and I want to show you some application examples and settings we need to do. Yeah, then we head on to the third bubble, which is actually, I would say, the most important component when it comes to this mixed system topic. This is the Fronius smart meter. We need it anyway for a good visualization in Solar.web, and I want to talk a little bit about this energy profiling, this hotkey I've written down here. So with energy profiling, we actually talk about the use of multiple Fronius smart meters in one system to display every energy flow within the system. And I want to show you, of course, where this can have a good impact, where this is needed maybe, and also how the addressing and the activation is done. Yeah, and last but not least, I have put together a summary because, yeah, it can be a little bit of a in detail topic today. Hopefully, not too difficult, but anyway, at the end of the webinar, I will summarize everything and show it to you. Okay, so let's start with the first slide here, and I want to talk about a collective visualization of mixed systems now in Fronius Solar.web and how this is done, and I want to explain it on behalf of this schematic we can see here. So let's imagine we have a customer and he has a third-party inverter or maybe a Fronius snap inverter in his system, and now he adds the Fronius GEN24 inverter to his system, because now he wants to integrate a battery, of course. He wants to be independent and want to increase the self-consumption and the autarky of the system. So the first thing we need to do is, of course, we want to add a Fronius smart meter at the feed-in point. Now it's displayed with address 1 here, and we want to connect it to the Gen24 inverter. It's very important to have this, because in any way, for the best operating and usage of charging and discharging the battery, therefore we need to know the energy flow within the system. So this is the first step we need to do, to add a Fronius smart meter at the feed-in point and connect it via this green line. This is a Modbus RTU communication line. And then we want to even add the third-party inverter to our Fronius Solar.web system. And this can be done very easily. We just integrate a secondary smart meter, also a Fronius smart meter, in this production path of the third-party inverter. This is displayed here in address 2. We also connect it to the same communication line of the first smart meter in this Modbus line and connect it to the Gen24. And now in this way, we only need to put the Fronius Gen24 inverter online, put it into a PV system on Solar.web, and there we have then everything displayed. And now I will switch to the next slide, because we have a real reference system I can show you on this behalf. So this is really a PV system where we have done this. We have a Fronius Gen24 inverter, and we have different brands of other manufacturers integrated. So they were already there. And now the customer has the ability to display them also on Fronius Solar.web. So there is no need for the customer to have different portals to visualize everything. It's just Fronius Solar.web, one portal where he can see everything. Okay, yeah, what we can see here is a screenshot, actually, not a very good one. I'm sorry for that, but it's winter here in Austria, so therefore we have no good production data. We can see it here, 60 watt. Everything is covered in snow. But anyway, I just want to explain what's going on here. So we have, of course, different opportunities to visualize everything. And the most important today is this bubble chart on the top left-hand corner. There we can see the production, yellow. We can see the consumption from the grid. We can see the battery state of charge and also the consumption. By a click on every individual one, we can see detailed data. And if we click now on this production data, so on the far left, top left hand, I will click now, and there it opens a detailed overview of every production meter that is in the system. So what we can display now here are 2 third-party inverters we have displayed here. Every one of them has a production meter, a Fronius smart meter added and connected to the Gen24 inverter. So therefore we can see both of them individually displayed and also their production data. Sorry for that. Now it's too much snow on the roof, therefore they don't produce. And yeah, then on the lower one, we can see here general production. This is actually our Gen24 inverter, and it's producing energy. And very down below, we can see the total energy. So it's a sum of all of these production data. So actually on the bubble chart itself, we always can see the summed up data of every inverter. And if we click on it, then we have this individual display of every inverter. So this is, of course, the very first step to be independent from more than one tool to visualize the PV system. And yeah, it's not only that we can see here the current power state, it's also possible for the customer or for the installer to choose here the top rubric analysis, where he can then select the history data even. So by the history data, he can then select production meter 1, 2, and the Gen24 inverter. And then for every inverter, there is drawn a single line with a different color where he can display the the history production data of every inverter. Okay, so that's the first really cool thing we can offer now also with our components, with our tools. And I quickly also want to show you, for those of you who may don't have already connected product onto Solar.web, I quickly want to give you a short tour how this can be done. So it's just 4 steps or 4 slides, 4 quick slides, and I've displayed 2 ways to do this here, how to bring a PV system into Solar.web. This can be done either by the Solar Start app, which is already available to download, or we can do it also via the desktop version, via browser. I want to show you how it's done via browser, so I will focus on that. And the first thing we need to do is, of course, we need to create a Solar.web account if we don't already have one, of course. And this is done by this top right corner here. So log in, and there comes the button register, and we need to set a new account. If we now have our account, we add the PV system. So it's a simple click on the plus button, and then he's asking about general data. So for example, the PV system name, we want to name it test system, for example, in this case. And then we need to add device data. So if it's a snap inverter, we want to add the data logger ID. We can find it on the bottom of the inverter, or we can add the serial number and the V code if we talk about a Gen24 inverter. And both of them, serial number and V code, can be found on the side of the Gen24 inverter. So on the right side, if we look at the inverter from the front. Yeah, and the next thing that pops up is actually a success window that tells us we have done it successfully. We can click OK, and that's it. So the customer has now integrated his system onto Solar.web, and he can now visualize it wherever he is via the browser version. Okay, so that's the first step. We have now brought this whole thing online, but now I really want to put the focus on the, as I've called it in the beginning, one of the most important components, which is the Fronius smart meter. And I want to talk about the term energy profiling. So I've visualized here the product itself. It's the Fronius smart meter TS. TS stands for touch screen. Maybe some of you all still know the older version of the Fronius smart meter. It looks a bit different. Don't be worried. We have just swapped the products. Let's say we have put out an upgrade, a design upgrade, and now it's step by step replacing the older smart meter. But in the functionality, there is no difference. There are only a few improvements. Yeah, and with this product, we have now the possibility to do energy profiling. And on this schematic, we can see we have a Gen24 inverter, and the first step would be, of course, to add a primary smart meter at the feed-in point. We can see it now that there is really, this is the second component after the utility, or the first component after the utility. There is already our Fronius smart meter, so really collecting all the energy flows and sending the data to the Gen24 inverter. And now we can go even further and say the customer wants to have a visualization on what real data energy do we really use for the charging of the electric vehicle, for the pool pump. How much energy does my air conditioning really use, or my heat pump? And in every detailed consumption path, we can add a secondary smart meter to visualize that. Or we can also integrate another inverter, can be a different brand. It can also be even a windmill or a hydro plant, a small one. And we simply add a secondary smart meter in this production path. And with this additional smart meter, now we talk about energy profiling. So this is where the term comes from. Just to give you a quick overview, what typologies do we have here? So for this Fronius Smart Meter TS, we have 3 typologies. Single phase 100 amp is of course very useful when it comes to displaying only single phase production or consumption lines. And then we have the most used component in 3-phase residential solutions, the 65 amp 3-phase Fronius Smart Meter TS. And if it's going bigger than that on commercial scale, we have also a 5 kiloampere smart meter. But please, on that one, please note that there is the need of external current sensors. If you need more information on those, just check our homepage, type in Fronius Smart Meter TS 5KA, and there you should find also the user manual where you can find detailed information for the selection of those external current sensors. But in the residential sector, we typically stick with the 100 amp single phase and the 65 amp 3-phase. Okay, a short overview on a technical basis on the wiring diagram. So what do we need to look out for is, of course, the correct connection of the power lines. So we come on the top here from the grid, connect here L1, L2, and L3. That's coming from the grid, and down below we go into the system to the loads. The neutral is also just split up here and connected on top of the Fronius Smart Meter. And then on the bottom side, we also have the communication connection points. So as already explained, we connect the Fronius Smart Meter via Modbus RTU. This is a RS485 data protocol, and it requires at least 3 lines. That's what we have displayed here with those 3 colors. And typically, we highly recommend to use at least a Cat5 standard Ethernet cable. Can be, of course, a higher standard, Cat6, Cat7, but at least it should be a Cat5. And yeah, there are also a few other important things to take in consideration. I will add on later, but just for the connection, we have here pin 8, 9, and 10 for the 65 amp. This is, of course, the 65 amp here now. And we want to connect those 3 lines to our Gen24 inverter. And when we open the Gen24 inverter, on the bottom, we have here this overview of the pilot. The pilot is actually the communication center of the inverter. And we have 3 orange plugs, whereas the middle one is the Modbus communication. And here I have displayed now in detail, we have here 2 separate Modbus connection points. They are called Modbus 0- and 0+ and the ground connection. And we have Modbus 1- and Modbus 1+ and ground. So actually what we can see here is we have the possibility to use both of them. They are the same connection points, let's say, and you can use both of them for the connection here. And yeah, we connected here on minus and plus and ground. And then we can see actually the first thing you need to consider, the communication line should be also a shielded cable. Please make sure it is a shielded cable, and we can ground the cable then on, or we can ground the shield on the Gen24 inverter here. So there is a specific connection point here where we can do this. So that's another very important point. Use a Cat5 cable and make sure it is shielded. Yeah, another thing is, it's not displayed here, very sorry for that, but please also make sure that you use twisted cable pairs between Modbus 0, Modbus minus and Modbus plus. So between green and yellow here, please make sure it is a twisted cable, because this is ensuring us the highest data communication quality. So we have 3 now, Cat5, shielded cable, and twisted cable pair. So, but there is also one last thing to take in consideration, and this is the termination resistance. Of course, when we talk about a Modbus communication, we need to make sure that on both ends of this line, we need to make sure to set a 120 ohm resistance. So this can be done on the Gen24 inverter via this little dip switch on top of the connection area. So this is for Modbus 0 and Modbus 1. Both of them individually can be switched. And on the Fronius smart meter, we simply need to put in a little cable bridge from 7 to 9. When we do this, we make sure to have this 120 ohm resistance activated. And then we are ready to go. So for a short summary, please use a Cat5. Make sure it is a shielded cable and ground the shield on one side. We can do it inside the Gen24. Please make sure to have the twisted cable pair between Modbus minus and Modbus plus. And also, please make sure to turn on the 120 ohm resistors at the end of the line, of the Modbus communication line. Yeah, so this is it in a short summary, let's say. And I now want to step ahead and show you the addressing of the Fronius smart meter. So addressing, why do we need to address the Fronius smart meter? If we only have one Fronius smart meter in our system, we have one at our feed-in point connected to the Gen24, then we don't need to do any addressing at all, because ex factory, as standard, the smart meter has the address 1, and our Gen24 inverter is also searching as standard for the address 1. So for just one smart meter, there is no need to change anything. But if we have now a secondary smart meter in the consumption path, in the production path, then we need to set address 2, address 3, and so on. And this can be done as following. So now actually I've displayed the older version of the smart meter. So if anyone is still using this product, this is how it's done. We have 2 buttons here on the smart meter, and we need to press them both together. Then it's asking for a code. This is actually also displayed in the user manual, but you can write it down from here as well. It's always the same code, 2633. We press enter with both of the buttons together, and then we go to the line address. And by address, we can see here as standard, it's written 001, and now we want to change it to 002, for example. And that's it. And the same thing, or a very similar thing, it is for the smart meter TS. Now we have, of course, the touch screen sensors, so it's a little bit better to navigate, in my opinion. We also enter the same password, 2633. We go to the setting address and change it, and then we end the settings actually, and now it's saved. So this is what we need to do on the hardware side. And now we go on to a software level, because of course, one last thing we need to take in consideration is the activation on the inverter itself, because it needs to know that the secondary smart meter is integrated. For the primary smart meter, a very short step-by-step guideline. Here we have now a commissioning process of such a primary smart meter, and we have here the so-called list component. Sorry, this is written here now in German, but it's very easy translated in English here. So component, and we click here now add component, and there we can select a primary smart meter. We select Fronius smart meter. We select also the position. The position is here now at the feed-in point, and as we can see here, the Modbus address is a standard 1. We click next, and that's it. That's how we integrate actually a primary smart meter, nothing more. For the secondary smart meter, we can also click the button add component. So now it is in English. Add component and select secondary smart meter. We need to select the type, in our case a Fronius smart meter connected via Modbus RTU. We need to select the position. In our case, we have, for example, a production meter, a generator meter. The category, You can also select via drop-down menu. In our case, it's a PV inverter from another brand, for example, and we just type in the third-party inverter or whatever name you want to give. We click Add, and that's it. One step I nearly forgot. Here we can see now the Modbus address is 2. For another secondary smart meter, it would be then 3, and so on and so on. So please make sure to also do the hardware settings on the smart meter itself, because otherwise the inverter and the smart meter can't find each other. Okay. Yeah, just one quick hint. So if you already have a system like this and you want to check how you did it in the past, for example, you can always go on Fronius Solar.web. If you have the rights of your customer system, and on the top bar here, we can see here the components. And under components, we can see here a full list of all the components available. So we can see the Gen24 inverter, and we can also see all the connected energy meters. So there is everything listed from the primary smart meter to the secondary smart meter. Just a hint for you, if you ever need to take a look in it, also on Fronius Solar.web, you can take a detailed look on that. Okay, so now let's make a imaginary check on the first chapter of this webinar, mixed systems. Let's step on to the second, dynamic power reduction. As I mentioned, it's also possible to have a dynamic power reduction for mixed systems. Now I want to show you the general settings that can be done for a Gen24 inverter. And this is actually also on the web interface. So this is done on the web interface of the inverter. So we need to connect with it. And there under settings, we can find the button dynamic power limit. We can select it here to activate it, limit for entire system. And we need to enter 2 numbers. The first one is the total DC power of the system. In our example, we talk about 19 kilowatt, for example, because we have a second production, a second inverter also integrated. I will show you in the next slide. And the maximum grid feed-in power. We need also select that. We can do that by watt or by percentage. So I've done here 70% of those 19 kilowatt peak, which is actually 13.3 kilowatt. So we need to set those 2 settings, and then down below we can see here a screenshot from such a system where we can clearly see, okay, there is then the limit of 13.3 kilowatt, and this is the limit, the maximum the inverter is feeding back into the grid. So yeah, the configurable area of this maximum grid feed-in is actually minus 10% up to 100%. This can be set. Okay, so now I want to explain a little bit what we just saw in this example. There is actually two applications, let's say. The first application is the following. We have a Gen24 inverter with 10 kilowatt, for example, and we have also an existing Fronius Snap inverter with 9 kilowatt. So in our case, the Gen24 has a bigger output power than the Snap inverter. Therefore, we want to regulate down the Gen24 inverter. Always the inverter with the bigger power rating. So this can be done very easily, and in the way we just saw. So we go into the web UI of the Fronius Gen24 inverter. We follow the instructions we can see here. It's everything I explained in the previous slide. We enter 19 kilowatt peak in total, and we then type in 70% or 13.3 kilowatt peak as maximum feed-in power, and that's it. So in this case, we only need one smart meter at the feed-in point to be able to realize the dynamic power reduction of the Gen24 inverter. Of course, in this scenario, There are two ways to integrate both of the inverters into one system. You may already know that we can't daisy chain or communicate both devices together. So there is no way we can connect the snap inverter together with the Gen24 inverter and visualize them as one. Therefore, we have two possibilities to do so. First one is we bring the Gen24 inverter online and we bring the snap inverter online, and on Solar.web we can add those two together and they will show us they will show up as one system. So this would be one solution, or you can also add a secondary smart meter here in the production line like we have seen in the beginning of this webinar, and add this secondary smart meter also on the Gen24 inverter. So two ways, one output actually. In both ways, we are integrating the second inverter also into our Fronius Solar.web system. Okay, yeah, let's step on and look at the second application. And now we have a different setting. We now have an existing Fronius snap inverter with a higher output rating than the Gen24 inverter. Yeah, here it's written down with 15 kilowatts. If we talk about maybe a 25 or a 20 kilowatt device, it's maybe a little bit more practical. Let's say this is a 20 kilowatt device, snap inverter, and a 10 kilowatt Gen24 inverter. Anyway, we now need to put the dynamic power reduction on the bigger inverter, which is the snap inverter. So we need to add a primary smart meter on the snap inverter to realize the necessary dynamic power reduction. But if the customer, for example, also wants to use the Fronius Gen24 inverter as a hybrid inverter, and if he wants to select to add a battery to it, he also needs a primary smart meter for this product. As we've mentioned in the beginning, to be able to realize the perfect charging and discharging of the battery, it's always needed to have a primary smart meter on the Gen24 inverter. So in this case, we need to add also a secondary smart meter right behind the first one to the Gen24 inverter. Okay, and now what we do is we connect with the snap inverter and set the necessary settings for the dynamic power reduction. We just follow the settings here. It's a very good list that's down here. So we also type in the total number of our watt peak into the system, and also the maximum grid feed in power we want to have, for example, 70%, 80, 90, 100%. And then we of course have the, let's call it issue that we can't add both of the systems in one Solar.web. The reason being, only one primary smart meter is allowed in one Fronius Solar.web system. So it's not possible for a Solar.web system to have two primary smart meters. It's not able to show it to us. So in this case, there is no other option to integrate also a secondary smart meter in this production path and connect it to the Gen24 inverter to visualize that. But before I talk too much, I will show it directly here. So now we can see maybe a little bit better. So this is the previously shown example. We have a 15 or a 20 kilowatt snap inverter, which has to be a dynamic power reduction device. And we also have the Gen24 inverter. Both of them have one primary smart meter, address 1, and we also add a secondary smart meter, a production meter, in the production path of the snap inverter and add it to the Gen24 inverter. And this way, we only need to add the Gen24 inverter to a Fronius Solar.web system, and we have all the production data and consumption data we need shown there. I hope it was understandable, or I hope you were able to follow me there. But anyway, I want to summarize everything once again. Maybe then it's clear. And also, if you have any questions right now, write them down and we try to answer them then. Yeah, so as a summary, what did we learn today in this webinar? It is possible to have a visualization of all inverters. Doesn't matter which brand, doesn't matter if it's another another inverter generation of Fronius. All can be shown in one Solar.web system with so-called production meters or secondary smart meters. So this is what we saw with this screenshot here. This is a real reference system here in Austria where we did this. What we also saw is that also a power reduction is possible to do also with mixed systems. We have seen two different applications, one where the Gen24 is bigger, one where it's smaller than the other inverter, than the other snap inverter, and both of them can be a power reduction system. Yeah, also we have seen the Fronius smart meter as core component in such a system, and I hope we all saw that we need to make sure to have the right settings, the Modbus addressings, and the right cabling done to make this all happening. So please put a focus on that, and also to use the as I explained, the right cable for the Modbus cabling and so on to ensure the highest data quality. And last but not least, we've talked about energy profiling and the usage out of that. So also the usage for the customer to visualize all the energy flows within the system. Okay. Yeah, last but not least, my final slide. The 24 hours of sun visualization is here. So it's not a visualization, it's our vision actually. Maybe some of you already heard of this. We always talk about 24 hours of sun, which is actually our vision of making renewable energy available 24 hours a day. And with our new product, the Gen24 inverter, this gets a step closer actually, because we can integrate battery, we can make more use out of the system as well. And now it's your turn. Yeah, and for that, of course, this is one way to learn about this, about it in a webinar. And I'm also happy to invite you to all the other webinars coming soon. And also in the near future, we want to start with our online trainings. So this is actually our first step into the digitalization, where we want to offer real close-up product training online. And as soon as the COVID situation allows it, we are also happy to invite you back again into our training facility here in Austria if you want to join us on a full day training, for example, on our products. Yeah, but anyway, now I've talked enough. I will ask now my colleague Michael, did we get in the meantime any question we can answer so far live?
Yeah, thank you, Christoph, for the very interesting webinar. And of course, we have received a lot of questions from our participants during the webinar. And I want to summarize the most important questions here. So first of all, one question was about the combination with our Fronius Solar Net ring from the Snap Inverter series. So as you mentioned, the Fronius Gen24 Plus devices, they have no solar net ring, and therefore please make sure in mixed systems to always also install a data manager 2.0 within the Snap Inverter to available data communication with Solar.web. Yeah, other question is, for example, about the exchange of the data manager and the pilot in the Gen24. So this was one question, if it is possible to exchange the data manager of the Snap Inverter series with the data communication card of the Gen24 Plus. So this is not possible. For our Snap Inverter series, we were using the so-called data manager card. And for the Gen24 Plus devices, we are using now a data communication interface called the pilot. And these two components, they cannot be exchanged to each other. So therefore, for the Gen24 Plus device, we have the pilot as a communication interface. And for the Snap Inverter series, we have the Data Manager card. So for all the other questions, we want to take our time to take them on the chat function. So if you have any other questions, please feel free to ask us them in the chat, and we will now stay online and answer all your questions in the live chat. Furthermore, I have information for you. So this recording and the presentation of this webinar, it will be sent to your email address, which you registered for this webinar, and then you have the possibility to view the webinar afterwards. If you haven't watched it live, you can always show the recording of the webinar and as well, of course, the presentation. Okay, so thank you. And I want to hand back to my colleague, Christoph, for the last words.
All right, thank you very much for answering those live questions. And yeah, thank you everyone to participating today, for staying with me through the last minutes, through the last slides. And yeah, so as I was saying, I'm happy to maybe see you in the next webinars or maybe even in the next trainings. In the meantime, check out our homepage for updates, for news about the trainings and webinars. And yeah, I hope it was interesting for you. I hope you could use some of the information. Stay healthy, and we see each other in the next one. Goodbye.